Babysitters, what's the most unsettling thing that's happened while you were babysitting? Serious. A person 2015 said, "My sister was babysitting and I got a screaming panic call from her. She was putting one child down for the night, a girl around 3, I think, and the little boy, around 6, stopped playing, grabbed a chair, unlocked the front door, and left the apartment. She was distraught. I told her to call 911 and I'd come help her with the toddler. When I got there, the police were talking to her and wrapping up. Thankfully, even though it was dark, 2 older women had been out for a walk and found him wandering down the sidewalk of one of the busiest roads in town. The weirdest thing is that the parents were completely unfazed. They apologized for not telling her he had done it before and wanted her to babysit again. My sister never babysat again." Melio 2017 said, "This happened to me. I was babysitting a 4/5-year-old boy who was adamant that he wanted McDonald's for dinner. I joked that he would have to use bread ties to pay for it, because I was a poor student at this point. He often played in his room, so I thought nothing of it when he disappeared for 5 minutes. He quietly left the house through the back door, opening the very large back gate and crossing a main road in a sketchy suburb. As I walked down the street looking for him, an old man in a car asked if I was looking for a boy and I said yes. He gave me a lift to the section of the road that he saw him at and I was able to jump out and grab him. No word of the lie, he had a bread tie in his hand to pay for the McDonald's. I'm a mum myself now and thinking about this story always makes me feel so sick to my stomach. I could have been responsible for the death or abduction of this sweet little boy all because of a stupid comment that I made." The Hingst said, "Apparently I was the same when I was a child. My parents have told me stories of me going on adventures probably as early as 3-4 years old. One time a neighbor found me way downtown on my tricycle, out exploring. And many different neighbors' acquaintances have apparently brought me home after finding me far from where I belonged. My father was out on walks looking for me on a regular basis and he said one time he was out looking for me he overheard someone in the distance say, 'Oh, there goes that father that is always searching for his son, again.' I rarely came home in time for both dinner or bedtime. I find it extremely weird that now at the ripe age of 29 I mostly stay at home and don't go out very often. Maybe I sated all my explorative needs pre-puberty." Dizzy Share 3155 said, "I remember the time my sister went missing for a whole day when she was 4. The police finally found her at the movie theater downtown Baltimore and brought her home right before sundown. Mom was too happy to get her home for her to get in trouble. Edit, she's still going to all kinds of places that the family would never dream of going. One day she just up and decided to move from the East Coast to the PNW because she thought she needed new friends." Miss Eslip 26 said, "The estranged husband showed up, drunk, demanding to see his kids. Tried to break into the house. I called the wife and the police. Never babysat for them again, even though the wife was very nice, just too traumatizing for all. The husband moved away, I believe. Wife is remarried and much happier." Wiggis Beliza said, "When I was in high school I used to babysit for a family that had a glass door off their kitchen and whenever I'd get something out of the fridge for the kids I'd think to myself how scary it would be if someone was just standing there looking in. One night it was storming really bad and I went to get one of the kids a glass of milk and lighting flashed and a filthy man I had never seen was standing there framed in the glass door staring in. I screamed and yelled for the kids to go hide. Of course they didn't listen and ran into the kitchen. Turns out it was their uncle stopping by to drop off something he had borrowed. He worked construction and had gotten quite muddy and was just going to leave whatever it was by the door, which is when I saw him. So it ended up being a case of nothing, but the terror I felt when the lightning lit him up was pretty intense." Watch Rare said, "I remember in 3rd grade, like 8 years old or so, I retrieved a lost ball for kickball. This was outdoors and the ball went behind the one row of parked cars on near the fence. While between cars my teacher was yelling at me to stay, and I couldn't understand her. I remember pausing briefly to try to hear her and then a car goes by really fast, for an outdoor playground with dozens of kids out. If I hadn't hesitated I'd have been hit. Crazy how life can be like that. As an adult I was crossing a street legally, at an intersection, and had to jump to avoid a car hitting me. If I had my back to it, I may not have been so lucky." Nortimer said, watching my younger sister, infant at the time. I wasn't much older, like 7. Mom's in the house, but downstairs dealing with a contractor that came by. Upstairs on the second story, internal balcony that overlooked the central area of the first floor. Railings all around the upper edges, with gaps, but pretty small gaps in most cases. Sister is crawling around, puts her head between bars on railing. And her head is small enough that her whole body starts to slip through. I got a hold of her shirt and some diaper before she tumbled completely through the railings. Managed to keep the grip and stopped her midair with my arms hanging out the railings. Cried bloody murder and my mom stood below while the contractor sprinted upstairs and pulled my sister up and back in. 30 plus years ago at this point, but still remember it pretty damn clearly. I took it pretty well but parents were quite shaken for a while. Marinot Poppins said. So I used to babysit for the lady who lived next door to me a few years back. Her children's room was the bedroom that shared a wall with me. While putting the kids to bed I heard someone moving around my bedroom. The walls were stupidly thin. One of the children told me that they hear the noise a lot. My parents weren't home. I didn't want to go home. Dizzle106 said. Babysitting my cousins when I was like 10 and 3 of them were less than 5. Babysitting is in quotes because their mom was home but I was in charge of them in the bedroom. She was in the living room with my oldest cousin. I was playing with one of them when the youngest, about 2, started coughing, holding his neck. I clearly remember just standing there for 5 seconds, stone cold, completely bewildered. I had no idea what to do. I just froze. Luckily my oldest cousin somehow heard the baby choking and he rushed in. He grabbed the baby and pulled a Barbie shoe out of his mouth, while I still stood there, shocked. I got an earful from my aunt and mom for nearly letting the baby die. I'll never forget it. I wasn't afraid, I wasn't scared, I didn't feel anything. Just froze. Let this be a lesson to never let 10-year-olds watch babies. They're just not equipped to deal with disaster, or at least I wasn't. Fimi said. At 8 or 9 I was put in charge of my infant brother for some reason. Got distracted by my Lipsmaker's collection, and the little booger climbed up the bunk bed. I didn't even know he could do that. He fell onto the side of a wooden toy box and broke his leg. My mom insisted it wasn't broken even though he wouldn't stand, because he barely cried. Poor bub got a big banana yellow cast while I sobbed hysterically. I still feel bad about it. He would turn out to just be the injury-prone brother. I don't know why that never tipped them off. It's a bad idea to put children in charge of children. Driftwood and Wave said. When I was maybe 4 or 5 my mother was mowing the lawns for the old lady who we lived across the road from and kept an eye on. Her house back onto the park and it was at the playground end. My sister, about 3 years younger than me so I must have been 5, climbed up the ladder of the slide. Which was quite high. And also metal. With concrete around the bottom of the ladder and at the end of the slide. Because it's the 80s. She climbed up to the top and then decided that she didn't want to go down the slide anymore, and didn't want to climb back down the ladder. So being not even 3 years old she simply let go. I, at age 5 years-ish, freaked out because I saw my little sister go splat and even then I had known it was my job to look after her. I had climbed up behind her and tried to get her to go down the slider ladder with me. I screamed for my mother so loudly she heard me over the sound of the lawnmower in the small distance we were from her. I don't remember much after that except for she had a huge egg on her forehead and my nan, her mother, came down to make sure my sister didn't go to sleep for too long or something to do with concussions. 30-something years on she's absolutely fine but the fear, not knowing what to do to help her and knowledge I let my little sister get hurt, that I felt today, without even being able to understand those feelings, still stick with me. I grew up in the 80s early 90s though so it was all totally fine to let your kids play at the park while you were near but not paying attention. My friend and I used to spend the whole day out exploring the neighborhood and bush in the school holidays, and no one knew where we were. Badger said. A family from church asked my mom if I could babysit for them, so I had to. Soon after the parents left, sitting in their living room watching cartoons with both the kids, a boy and a girl, the little girl asked for some kind of elaborate snack or something and I chuckled and said no sorry. No expression on her face, the little girl stood up, crossed the living room to a crate that their large dog was locked in, released it, and told it to go after me, which it did. I remember that evil little kid cackling while this huge dog chased me in circles around the house. and that was the end of my babysitting career. Chub Rub 8 said, I live in a small town and our prized possession is a rather large mental hospital. I got a call from the parents telling me to lock all the doors and windows because a dangerous patient had escaped and was in our neighborhood. I told the kids to stay inside, but didn't tell them the reason in order to not freak them out. I went to change a diaper and when I got back the oldest boy, about 8, was missing. I immediately started panicking and went to look in the backyard. He had decided that that was the perfect time to pee outside because the outside potty was better. Bonus, I babysat 2-year-old twins and they often burped and farted at the same time. It was terrifying. Yalvayanaher said, when I was 14, I got hired to sit for brothers, ages 10 and 12. I felt pretty weird about it because, 12? Even by the time I was 10, I was sitting for my younger siblings. But I was like, well, their parents must think they need someone there, and who am I to turn down a king's ransom of $2 an hour? It was the early 90s. It was a nighttime job so I got the kids into bed at their bedtimes and settled in to do homework and watch MTV until the parents got home. I looked up to find the 12-year-old had emerged from his room and was jerking off. Just right there in the doorway, staring at me. I was like, and he was like, it's okay, I'm 12. I was like, I don't think it's okay, go back to bed. But he just lingered into doorway for the rest of the evening and finally sprinted off to bed when he heard his parents' truck in the driveway. I didn't tell them what happened and never sat for that family again. Twist Metwist said, shit, I had that same thing happen to me as a teen. Same age difference, me at 14, kids at 12 and 10. The 10-year-old kept trying to climb this grandfather clock. When the 12-year-old decided staring and wonking was his bedtime favorite, I rang the parents on their phone. Their lovely dinner date was cancelled. They tried to give me extra as hush money, promised more if I'd sit again for them. Nope. All the nope. I would go far out of my way just to avoid their place. As an adult, I suspect developmental issues with both boys. That's fine, but really, having a sitter that close in age to them who has no idea there's going to be problems was awful. Tragedy Porn Family Vid said, as a teenager I was watching a 4-year-old and a baby for the first time when I got really dizzy and felt awful. I called my mom for help. She yelled at me for a bit and told me I'd have to call the parents to leave their date, because she wasn't coming. I said they hadn't left a contact number and asked for help again. She told me to figure it out. I passed out trying to call 911. The last thing I remember before I fell asleep was that they had a pool and terror for the kids. The 4-year-old put his sister in her car seat because she kept trying to go near the water, and then stayed by me to wait for an adult to return. His mom's sister found me unconscious on the floor. She hit me and that brought me around enough to stagger to the car as long as I could lean on something. In retrospect, I'm sure she thought I was high. She offered no help and was livid as she drove me home. I was already a pretty depressed teen, and the shame at not being able to get help for the kids meant I got home and just sort of waited to see if whatever was making me collapse would get worse. I passed out again after getting home, threw up a few times, and then started getting better. I was woozy for several days after. Still no idea about what caused that. I refused to babysit for anyone for months afterwards. The idea of what could have happened was horrifying. But yeah, going from okay to passed out on the floor while trying to dial 911 is the worst thing that ever happened to me while babysitting with that family. Rat Mob said, I'm deceased. My wife does her from home and her clients will often bring their kids with them. This usually results in me having to keep them occupied for several hours. One time, this woman came with her son and daughter who were maybe 7 and 5 and this boy's farting non-stop and laughing his head off. At one point he aims his arse towards his sister and farts in her general direction, which seems to piss her off. I made some joking comment like do that again and I'll fart on you and this kid's eyes just lit up. He starts going yeah, fart on me, and won't shut up about it. I get a bit freaked out and try to brush it off and carry on distracting them and trying to entertain them but this kid won't drop it. He carries on farting for the next 20 or so minutes and at one point flat out sits on his sister and lets one rip. She looks like she's about to burst out crying and wriggles free, then this kid lies down on my sofa, opens his mouth wide, then literally screams pin me down and fart in my mouth with clenched fists raised in the air. I had maybe another hour or so of looking after these kids and he spent the entire time trying to get me to fart in his mouth or on him in some capacity. Kid was fucking weird. Spark 2424 said, I have a crazy aunt and this was about 25 years ago. I was a teen and I babysat Alan. One evening she called and said her buddy needed a sitter ASAP and I would be paid well for such short notice. She said they were about 6 and 8. Also I was already watching my aunt's kid who was almost 1. She came and took me to the guy's house and I walk in carrying my little cousin on my hip. The guy thanks me and rushes off to his overnight shift. So it's pretty dim and only a lamp is on. I'm still standing there holding my cousin and introducing myself to the kids, who are itching like crazy. I say what's wrong, and the girl says we have lice. OMG, I was so freaked out and so glad I hadn't put my little cousin down yet. I grabbed the phone and called her mom to come get her ASAP. I said you need to call your friend and he needs to send someone else or get home because no way am I staying. Aunt comes to pick up the baby, and I'm just standing in the living room waiting for the dad to come home. I can see into the kitchen and I start seeing things moving so I walk closer. There were roaches everywhere and they weren't afraid. I was mortified. I didn't even say goodbye to the dad when he walks in, I just bolted to my aunt's car. I said don't ever ask me to babysit for anyone like that again. I went home and showered for probably 2 hours. R3DB0W said, my younger brother has pulled a knife on me 3 times, all for completely random and unnecessary reasons while my parents were out of the house. Wouldn't let him eat everything he wanted. Wouldn't let him watch TV. Wouldn't let him play video games. These were all by my parents' request before they left. In separate occasions my brother is 4 years younger than me. I told my parents each time and they said it doesn't matter since he didn't actually stab me. He got close twice though, that kinda fucked me up. He got in trouble but I don't think it was equivalent to what he did. Palmkpoilers7 said, I was babysitting my cousin who was a few years younger than me. I don't know why my aunt had entrusted me with a child that is about the same age as me. My aunt had just gone through a divorce with her husband. Does he still count as my uncle? Well, the husband showed up at around 8 p.m. and was angrily knocking on the door demanding to see my cousin. I just stood there against the door because my stupid 12-year-old ass thought that if he knocked down the door, I could stop a grown-ass man. I kept hearing muffled noise through the door. My hearing isn't the best. We stayed there for 20 minutes until my aunt showed up. Apparently he was just there to collect my cousin because he had custody that weekend and the muffled noise I were hearing was him explaining the whole situation to me but I was too fucking stupid to understand. He was also very nice about it afterwards and didn't make a big deal out of it. I still talk to him often. Joyfall said, was babysitting my niece. She started crying in her crib upstairs so I paused Netflix and went up to check on her. The lights were completely off as to not wake her up more. As I was standing in this completely dark room soothing her I heard voices downstairs in the living room talking about breaking in and taking things. I had been alone in the house, my cell phone was downstairs, and my sister wasn't coming home for another 4 hours. I was freaking the fuck out. After what seemed like forever I got up the courage to go check out the noise, only to find Netflix had unpaused and it was a heist movie I was hearing. Lerixa said, when I was 14 I used to babysit 2 young boys while their mother worked from home. There was this one day where the 3 of us were outside on their driveway, the kids playing and me just standing around watching them. For context, I grew up rurally and this was in the middle of nowhere. The house was on an empty road with some neighboring houses in the distances but not close by. Anyways, we're at the side of the house on the driveway and a car drives by, then stops, turns around and pulls into the driveway. There is a man and woman inside and the woman, tall and blonde and maybe 45-ish years old, gets out and starts walking quickly toward me. The kid's mom noticed somebody had pulled into the driveway and stepped onto the porch to ask who she was and what she wanted, and the woman at the point stopped and said she wanted directions. The kid's mom gave her directions and the woman got back in the car with the man and they left. The whole incident was very innocuous and not really noticeable, only it nevertheless gave me the creeps. The vibes I got off the woman as soon as she got out of the car were pure bad. I felt it in my bones as she walking towards to me. I 100% believed she intended to snatch me and drag me into the car for her husband, and I feel even stronger about it as an adult. She was walking to me so fast, and when adults ask kids for directions, They stay in the car and roll down the window to ask. They don't get out of the car and come at them. Capital said, I was 11 babysitting for a neighbor who had 4 kids under the age of 6. I was to watch them from noon until midnight. I was making dinner for them and the older boys were playing in the backyard while the 9-month-old was napping. I went to get them from the backyard and one of them had climbed a trellis onto the roof and wouldn't come down. After a long time of persuading him he came down. I set him up to eat while I went to get the baby up. I go to her crib and she had dug in her diaper and smeared shit all over her, the crib and walls. After cleaning them all up and putting them to bed I laid on the couch. Next thing I know the parents and another couple were standing over me. I had fallen asleep. They knocked, rang the doorbell and finally climbed through the window above the kitchen sink. I was worn out and they thought it was funny. I declined future jobs with them due to my embarrassment. Magpeep said in my 20s I worked many years for a nanny agency and mostly did temp nanny jobs, which meant going over to different people's houses all the time. I was watching some kids I'd never met before, and at night. They lived in a very large, historic home in a nice neighborhood, and the house was actually on the historic register. We were downstairs in the basement watching TV or something and one of the kids went upstairs, I can't remember what for. I decided to go check on him and I walks up this huge set of stairs. I heard an adult Malay voice coming from inside the house. My heart just skips a beat and I'm terrified. But the voice is just talking. I follow the sound of the voice, walk across the large foyer, and turn the corner into the giant formal living room and there's this older man just talking to the kid. I must have looked terrified. The man said, "Hi, I'm Grandpa. I didn't know they were out tonight." Holy shit, Grandpa. Magpeep said, at a permanent job I had I was home with the kid, about 6:30 p.m., and as we were sitting in the living room I see some guy walk by the big windows along the living room side of the house. This house was also big and old, and in an urban setting, so the backyard is tiny and the fence for the yard is set all the way back at the back of the house. This guy walks by the side of the house and I can see him go to open the back gate. Meanwhile we're sitting like fish in a fishbowl. It's dusk out and the windows are all open. I rush to make sure the back doors are locked. Literally less than 10 from the fence the guy's about to jump open and of course are all glass, and yell at the girls to run upstairs. I call 911 and try to look and see where this guy is but I don't see him anywhere. I find the girls cowering in a play tent in the 3rd floor playroom. The police come pretty quickly and didn't find the guy so we think he was just hopping fences. The mom gets home about 2 minutes after the police leave. Twist said, I was roughly 12, and we were visiting family while my parents were out of the country. My aunt offered to watch me and my 2 younger sisters, one 9 and the other about 9 months old. I'd been half watching them the whole vacation so the idea of having a break sounded fantastic. Barely half an hour after we get there, Aunt S says, "Oh, I forgot, I need to take your cousin Jay to dance class. You're good watching the babies for an hour, right?" My 9-year-old sister who was close to Jay went with her. This left me with my baby sister and my 2-year-old hyperactive boy cousin. Okay, not happy about the forgotten dance class. The so-called offer to give me a break was a scam. Then the deluge. Somehow, everyone in the whole area, not a nice area, BTW, knew there was a sitter. All of my aunt's friends plunked their toddlers down with a just let them watch TV and wave goodbye. Suddenly I was babysitting nearly a dozen kids, ages ranging from 8 months to 7 years old. This was all before cell mobile phones, so I couldn't track down my aunt. The baby, it turned out, had a fever and sicked up all the formula. The eldest boy started attacking the younger kids with slowly escalating violence, which wound up my boy cousin who was big into the Hulk. There was a lot of smashing. Twist said. The hour passed, and still no aunt. 2 hours. At 3 hours, I rang my grandmother in a complete state of meltdown, because some guy had come in without any kids and was just staring at me. Shortly after, my aunt finally came home, with my sister and cousin, all happy because they'd decided to hit them all. She was a bit baffled by all the extra kids. Creepy guy just smiled at her, then me, then wandered out the door. I was in tears. She mocked me about how I would never become a good mother if I couldn't handle this. Grammy arrives like some kind of saint on a charger, sweeps me up and we drive home. Once there, I get Coco in quiet. She calls my aunt back and rips her to shreds. The rest of the holiday, No babysitting, not even my sister's. My sister was furious for years that I disliked Aunt S, until, surprise surprise, she too got scammed. Dwight Schrute 2312 said, I occasionally watch my younger cousins when I want to earn some money. All three of them are below 6 years old, so it's already a hassle, but the youngest, around 2 years old, knows how to work every door handle and lock in the house. Last summer, when he was 1, he would just up and get his boots on and leave the house to go play outside, and my aunt lives in a very secluded area on a farm. Only a few other houses even somewhat clossy with lots of fields and cows by their house. One time I was sitting in their living room when the kids were supposed to be sleeping and I went to check on the youngest and he wasn't in his bed and I flipped the fuck out. I was 12/13 at the time. And went to check the backyard and he had his blanket and sippy cup with him and had almost reached the cows when I got to him. Needless to say, I only watch those kids when I really need money. Snoob Snob said, once I was babysitting a friend's 3-year-old daughter. She had gone to bed and I was watching TV waiting for her parents to come home. Suddenly, she just starts screaming bloody murder. The someone is in the process of killing me type of screaming. I rush into her room and find her sitting up in bed. I sit down next to her, start talking to her, and she is just staring off into space, completely ignoring me. Eventually she settles down and goes back to sleep. Turns out she had night terrors and this sort of thing was relatively common, but no one had told me and I had never heard of them before, so it really freaked me the fuck out. Another time, when I was about 8ish, my sister, who was 3, and I were being babysat by this teenage girl who had only babysat us once before, but was super cool and awesome. This time, she called her friends, gave them our address and asked them to come over. I was like, dude, this is not okay. I'm not sure about this. But she just laughed it off and said it was cool. After about 20 minutes a car full of stupid teenagers showed up, and they hung out for a bit on our driveway. Thank God they didn't come in the house before leaving. Unfortunately, they ditched my babysitter's boyfriend, so he ended up staying there until my parents got home, which they both knew would be bad. My dad almost shattered the windows on our house when my parents got home. After some yelling, he drove them both home and my mom came and asked me WTF had happened, so I told her. That girl never babysat for us, or anyone else we knew ever again.